Hank Miller didn't know that a simple walk with his dog would lead him into a life-or-death battle. But suddenly, the peace shattered. Hank's golden retriever, Cooper, bolted toward the surf, barking with a frantic, piercing tone Hank hadn't heard in years. In the gray morning light, a dark, heavy mass lay heaving in the shallow waves. It wasn't a log. It wasn't debris. It was a living creature, a young dolphin, but it looked like something out of a nightmare. The animal was thick with black, suffocating oil, its skin bubbling with parasites that were eating it alive. Hank felt his heart drop into his stomach. This wasn't just an animal in trouble. This was a soul crying out for a miracle. Without thinking of his own safety or his 72-year-old knees, Hank plunged into the frigid Gulf waters. The water was cold, but the sight before him was colder. As Hank reached the dolphin, his hands came away stained with a sticky, foul-smelling sludge, the remnants of a leaked oil rig miles away. The dolphin, whom Hank would later name Scout, was barely moving. Its blowhole emitted a wet, rattling sound, a desperate gasp for air that sounded like a final goodbye. Hank saw the parasites, the sea lice and barnacles, clinging to the open sores caused by the toxic oil. It was a vision of pure suffering. Hank reached out, his voice trembling but steady. "Easy, Scout. I've got you, son. Just breathe with me." The dolphin's eye, usually bright and full of mischief, was clouded and half-closed. But as Hank placed his hand under its belly to keep it upright, Scout gave a tiny, weak shiver. It was a spark, a choice. Hank had to hold this creature's head above water, or it would drown right there in his arms. He stood chest deep, fighting the pull of the tide, his own body shaking with cold. He realized then that he couldn't let go. If he let go, the ocean would claim what was left of this broken life. He was the only thing standing between Scout and the abyss. For a moment, the world went quiet. The initial shock passed, leaving only the sound of the waves and Hank's steady whispering. He managed to reach into his pocket with his dry hand and pull out his waterproof phone. His fingers were slick with oil, making the screen hard to read. He called the Marine Rescue Center. The dispatcher promised help, but they were 30 minutes away. 30 minutes. In the world of a dying animal, that is an eternity. Hank settled in, finding a rhythm. He used his body to block the wind, creating a small sanctuary in the vast, uncaring sea. Stick with me, friends, because what happened next in that water is something that still keeps Hank awake at night. A moment where the hunter became the hunted. Hank's mind drifted back to his days in the Coast Guard. He had saved many people from the water, but this felt different. This was a silent pact. He watched Cooper on the shore, the dog pacing back and forth, acting as a sentry. The sun began to peek over the horizon, turning the oil on Scout's back into a shimmering, deadly rainbow. Hank felt a strange sense of peace, even as his legs grew numb. But that peace was about to be ripped away. The smell of the oil was strong, but the smell of the dolphin's open wounds was stronger. In the distance, a dark fin sliced through the water. It wasn't a dolphin fin. It was triangular, jagged, and moving with a terrifying, predatory intent. A bull shark. In these waters, they are known as the lions of the sea. Brazen, aggressive, and always hungry. It had caught the scent of blood and distress. Hank froze. He was chest deep, unarmed, and tethered to a dying animal. The shark circled, closing the gap. Hank could see the shadow of the massive predator just feet away. His instincts screamed at him to run back to the sand, to save himself. But he looked down at Scout. The dolphin had sensed it too. Scout's body tensed, a low, mournful click vibrating through the water against Hank's chest. If Hank left, the shark would tear Scout apart in seconds. Hank didn't run. Instead, he grabbed his heavy wooden walking stick that had drifted near him and began to beat the surface of the water with all his might. He shouted at the top of his lungs, a primal, guttural roar of a man defending his own. "Not today! Get back!" The shark lunged, a flash of white belly under the waves. Hank shoved the stick downward, feeling it strike something hard and sandpaper rough. The predator hissed through the water, startled by the sudden resistance. It circled one last time, eyeing the old man and the dog barking wildly on the shore, before disappearing into the deep blue. Hank collapsed against the dolphin, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had faced the lion and won, but his strength was fading fast. The adrenaline began to wash away, replaced by an exhausted ache. The rescue boat finally appeared on the horizon, its engine a welcome hum against the silence. A team of young, energetic biologists jumped into the water, their faces masked with concern. They worked quickly, sliding a soft stretcher under Scout. They praised Hank, calling him a hero, but he couldn't even speak. He just watched as they lifted the heavy, oil-slick body onto the boat. "Will he make it?" Hank finally rasped. The lead vet, a woman named Dr. Sarah, looked at the dolphin and then back at Hank. "He's a fighter, Mr. Miller, but he's taken in a lot of toxins. It's going to be a long night." Hank refused to go home. He followed them to the Clearwater Marine Aquarium. He sat in the waiting room, his clothes still damp and smelling of salt and oil. He looked at his hands, they were stained. He realized that the oil wouldn't just wash off. The memory of that morning was etched into his skin. You might think the danger was over, but the real battle was just beginning inside the sterile walls of the clinic, and a shocking discovery was about to change everything. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Scout was placed in a specialized pool with filtered water. The team worked tirelessly to scrub the oil from his delicate skin. Hank watched through the glass, his heart heavy. Suddenly, the monitors began to beep frantically. Scout's heart rate was plummeting. Dr. Sarah yelled for the oxygen. Hank watched in horror as the dolphin stopped moving. The rhythmic rise and fall of the blowhole ceased. The line on the monitor went flat. Beep, beep, beep. A heavy silence fell over the room. The doctors began chest compressions, pushing down on the dolphin's sturdy frame. Minutes passed. They were losing him. Hank couldn't stay behind the glass anymore. He pushed through the door. "Let me in," he cried. He ran to the edge of the pool. He remembered the connection they had in the surf. He remembered how Scout had looked at him. Hank leaned over the water and let out a long, sharp whistle. A specific whistle he had used to call Cooper, but with a different, melodic twist. He whistled the tune of an old folk song his mother used to sing about the sea. Scout's body gave a sudden, violent twitch. The monitor jumped. Beep, beep. A ragged breath exploded from the blowhole, spraying salt water into Hank's face. Scout was back. But as the doctors stabilized him, Dr. Sarah noticed something on the ultrasound. Her eyes went wide. "Wait, look at this!" She pointed to the screen. Deep inside Scout's scan, there was a second heartbeat, a smaller, fainter one. The twist hit Hank like a physical blow. Scout wasn't a he, Scout was a mother, and she wasn't just fighting for her own life. She was carrying a calf. The reason she had stayed so close to the shore, the reason she had fought the shark so hard, was because she was protecting the future. But the oil was a poison, and the calf was in grave danger. The room moved from panic to a focused, quiet intensity. The mission had doubled in weight. They had to save 2 lives now. Over the next few weeks, Scout became a local sensation. The Sanibel Mother, the news called her. Hank visited every single day. He brought Cooper, who would sit by the edge of the tank, his tail thumping softly. Hank began a subplot of his own. He started a community drive to hold the oil company accountable. He spoke at town halls, his voice booming with the authority of a veteran. He wasn't just a retired man anymore. He was a guardian. He saw the way the community rallied around Scout. Children brought drawings, elders brought donations. It was a beautiful reminder of the good in humanity. But as the day of the birth approached, the tension returned. The toxins in Scout's blood were still high. The doctors weren't sure if the calf would be born healthy or if it would be born at all. Hang on, because we're approaching the moment that brought an entire city to tears. A moment of pure, unadulterated hope. It happened at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Hank got the call and rushed to the center. The pool was dimly lit. Scout was swimming in tight, labored circles. Dr. Sarah was in the water, guided by red flashlights to keep the stress low. The air was thick with anticipation. Suddenly, a small, dark tail emerged. The calf was coming, but it was coming tail first, which can be dangerous for dolphins. Scout was exhausted. She stopped swimming and began to sink. "She's giving up," one of the assistants whispered. Hank walked to the edge of the tank. He didn't whistle this time. He just spoke. "Don't you dare, Scout. You didn't survive that shark for this. You didn't survive that oil for this. Look at me." Scout turned her head, her eye finding Hank's in the dim light. With one final Herculean effort, she arched her back and propelled herself forward. A tiny, perfect dolphin slid into the water. For a second, it didn't move. It drifted toward the bottom. The team held their breath. Then Scout dived down, nudging the little one with her nose, pushing it toward the surface. The calf took its first breath, a tiny puff of air. It was alive. It was healthy. It was a miracle. The room erupted in hushed cheers and tears of joy. Hank sat on the floor, his head in his hands, weeping for the first time in decades. The weeks that followed were filled with light. The calf was named Hope. Watching Scout and Hope swim together was like watching a dance of pure grace. The oil company, under immense public pressure, agreed to a massive cleanup fund for the Gulf. Hank's mission was working, but there was one final hurdle. The goal was always to return them to the wild. But could they survive? Scout had spent so much time in captivity, and Hope had never known the open ocean. The day of the release was set for early March. The entire town of Sanibel gathered on the beach. It was a bright, warm morning, the exact opposite of the day Hank had found her. You won't want to miss the final goodbye, because Scout had one last surprise for the man who saved her life. The transport boat took Scout and Hope 5 miles out, past the reefs into the deep, clean blue. Hank was on the boat, his hand resting on the side of the transport tank. As they lowered the gate, Scout didn't leave immediately. She swam out, then circled back to the boat. Hope followed her, mimicking her mother's every move. Scout came right up to the side of the boat where Hank was standing. She rose out of the water in a spy hop, looking Hank directly in the eye. It was a moment of profound recognition. Hank reached out and touched her rostrum one last time. "Go on, Scout. Go home." Then it happened. Scout turned and began to swim away at full speed. Suddenly, she launched herself out of the water. She flew 10 feet into the air, spinning in a magnificent silver arc. And right beside her, tiny Hope did the same. It was a double leap, a synchronized explosion of joy and freedom against the setting sun. It was the ultimate thank you. It was the sight of a family restored, of a tragedy turned into a triumph. Hank stood on the deck, his silver hair blowing in the wind, a smile on his face that felt like it could light up the world. The Sanibel mother was finally free. The boat turned back toward the shore, leaving the 2 dolphins to disappear into the horizon. The tension that had lived in Hank's chest for months finally evaporated. He felt light. He felt purposeful. He went home that night and sat on his porch with Cooper. He looked out at the Gulf, knowing that out there, somewhere, life was continuing because of a choice he made on a random Tuesday. It reminds us, doesn't it, that no matter how old we are or how broken the world seems, a single act of kindness can ripple out and save more than just one life. It can save the future. It can save us. Hank Miller still walks that beach every morning. He still keeps an eye on the waves, and sometimes, just sometimes, he swears he sees a familiar fin in the distance, leaping for the sheer joy of being alive. I hope this story touched your heart as much as it did mine. If you want to see more incredible rescues and stories of hope that prove it's never too late to make a difference, click the video on your screen right now. There are so many more heroes like Hank and survivors like Scout waiting to be discovered. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell us, what would you have done if you were in Hank's shoes? We love hearing from you. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.